Our poll question today: how are you feeling about the team's 5-on-5 scoring heading into the season? Our options are great, not bad, I'm worried, and as always, I'm angry. Leading the vote right now is I'm worried. 46% of voters saying they are worried about the Canucks 5-on-5 scoring, 40% saying not bad, 10% say they are angry, and 4% of folks say they feel great about the Canucks 5-on-5 scoring heading into the season. Harman, where do you land on this poll?
It's a legitimate concern. You look at last season, and I've referenced this stat a lot of times, so apologies if you've heard this before, but it's so important that it's worth repeating. Last year at 5-on-5, the Canucks ranked 20th in 5-on-5 goals. They were 26th in generating shots. And keep in mind, that includes Pettersson and Kuzmenko being so dominant in that top line role at even strength. Plus, most of that season was with Boudreau's aggressive, fun, freewheeling system. And we've seen it under Tocchet that to try and bolster the group's defensive structure and reduce the number of grade A chances that they allow, that they're going to tighten things up. And that means less creativity. That means less sort of free reign to create and play offensively the way that you perhaps would have under Boudreau. And so you keep those things in mind, and especially looking at the way the clubs looked in preseason. Again, I don't put too much stock into preseason, to be totally honest, but you can clearly see, yeah, this team looks a lot better defensively, but they haven't generated a whole lot offensively, especially without Hughes and Pettersson. And that's really my concern. You look at the numbers last year, and even when you strictly just look at 5-on-5, the goals for and against differential, when Pettersson was on the ice at 5-on-5, the Canucks were +8 in terms of goal differential, which is really good, especially considering the state of the blue line last year. But with Pettersson on the bench, which means lines 2 to 4, Canucks were outscored by 35 goals at 5-on-5. -35. They were obliterated, and that's a whole ball game in terms of where you need to improve to make the playoffs this coming season is non-Pettersson and non-Quinn Hughes minutes. And so you look at this roster and you go, okay, the bottom six hopefully is better, right? Because last year you had Sheldon Dries as your third line center for a large chunk of the season. Now you're stronger up the middle with Suter and Bluger. By the way, two guys who I've been quietly impressed with through camp and preseason so far. I think their defensive intelligence has clearly shined, and I think they're going to make a significant impact on the penalty kill. But the big wild card that has to be better and has the potential in it to be better, to me, is the second line. And that's where you get into the whole conversation about JT Miller and Brock Boeser and how does DiGiuseppe fit, or whoever else is on that left wing, whether it's Mikheyev. That, to me, that second line, that's the X factor. That's the wild card in terms of improving this team's 5-on-5 scoring and becoming formidable enough at even strength in non-Pettersson, non-Hughes minutes to make the playoffs.
Do you think that's the biggest kind of X factor or wild card heading into the season? Because I think before the season, a lot of us would have said, well, the penalty kill has to be better or this team's not going to improve. Do you think after seeing them in camp and after seeing them in preseason, that is now 5-on-5 scoring, that's the biggest factor for this team?
It's tough to rank them, right? Because I'm sort of looking at it and going, all right, thankfully you've taken care of the backup goaltending situation, which seeing Casey DeSmith in preseason, I feel a lot more comfortable than I did heading into the season with Martin and Seeloff. So that's nice. But outside of that, you've still got the defense, which I'm trying to find the right word about it, because I'm not panicking about it. I don't know if concerned is too strong of a word, but it's still not great. It's still an open question as to whether it's playoff caliber. That's how I'd put it. So you have that surrounding the defense. The 5-on-5 scoring and the state of the second line, sure, you'd bring up, and the penalty kill. I think those are the areas, and from there, I don't know how you'd rank it, but those are the main areas that are still giving me sort of reason for pause, and really, I think the 5-on-5 aspect, a huge chunk of it can be solved if, again, that Miller line can play up to its potential the way it did down the stretch in the last 30 games that they're talking. And of course, it comes with the caveat that in those Tocchet 30 game stretch or so, you had really soft competition, really soft schedule. But the difference between what we saw from that Miller line last year compared to the year before is massive, right? You look at Miller's on ice 5-on-5 goal differential. The Canucks were outscoring teams by 14 with Miller in 2021-22, that 99-point season. Last year, the Canucks were minus 14 at 5-on-5 with that Miller line on the ice. So that's a 28 goal differential swing at 5-on-5 1 year over the next. And that's not just all on Miller, right? I'm looking at Brock Boeser and I'm going, last year, of course, was a tough year for him dealing with his father's death. So many different factors at play. You look at his on-ice results, it was the worst defensive year of his career in terms of his defensive play, board battles, the turnovers, the back checks. I feel like we were so focused on Miller's miscues and his big mistakes, and rightfully so. For the first 40 to 50 games, it was really rough for Miller, particularly when he was playing center. But we almost forgot, as a result of that, how much Boeser was really struggling in that area and how much better he can be. And I don't mean that like when I'm saying, oh man, Boeser's coming off the worst defensive season of his career. I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying that from a perspective of we've seen him drive much better two-way results. So there's legit bounce back potential there. And that's something that could really help Miller, because when I look at how much that Miller line struggled in a hard matchups role to start the year, and you had that quote, I remember being on the first road trip and Miller's going, swearing about how many, about being on the ice for all of the first 8 goals against that the team had surrendered. It wasn't just Miller. It was, man, Boeser struggling. And on the left wing too, you had Pearson before he got hurt, looked really slow, really ineffective. And that's where, again, DiGiuseppe or Mikheyev, once he returns, you need more from that sort of wing spot too. And that can hopefully go a long way towards fixing the team's 5-on-5 scoring and their overall form there.
We've talked about how it looks like Boeser's added a step. We saw the 4-assist night, obviously. How confident are you in that second line heading into the season? Because, like you said, we focused a lot on Miller, but with Boeser specifically, how are you feeling about him and his role on that line?
Yeah, it's always a wild card with Boeser, because the biggest thing for him is just, first of all, he's got to stay healthy. What tends to happen a lot is you'll sometimes watch him, and I remember last year he was motivated to score 30 goals, and he had that camp of preseason, or that quote in training camp of preseason about how confident he felt about being able to hit that mark. The problem is when he gets hurt, it isn't just the time that he misses, but when he comes back into the lineup, he's rusty, especially because for a guy like that, when you miss game action and you're already not a fast skater, man, he'll look slow sometimes. He'll look rusty. I mean, you even go all the way back. We've seen this multiple times in many seasons. After his rookie season, when he had that scary back injury, and he was sort of heading into camp after not having a full sort of summer, and he looked a step behind. And that just goes to show you again, if he can stay healthy for a prolonged stretch, I think right off the bat, that's going to help him keep that I guess a little bit of extra quickness that he's shown. I don't think you're not looking at him and going, oh my God, look at how much faster he's going. But even go back to the second half of his season when he started picking up the pace offensively and closed out strong. Again, the big difference was, okay, he was starting to win loose pucks a lot more. He was way more effective on the forecheck. And when you look at when Boeser's played at his best on a line, whether it was the Lotto line in 1920 or the 2021 shortened 56-game season, that's been such an essential part of his identity. And I think you don't see that aspect unless you see the prolonged bill of health. So that's the first box that you need checked for him to live up to his potential this season. And then beyond that, yeah, I do think he has the ability to to play better from a two-way perspective. Because look, we focus on that 30-goal milestone and that, oh, can he get to 30 goals so much that for him, though, when I'm looking at his play heading into the season, I'm not even necessarily so much focused on the goal totals as I am about, can he help drive play? Because that line is, in all likelihood, going to play against the other team's best lines. Because yes, Elias Pettersson is this team's best two-way centerman, but this coaching staff, whether it was Boudreau or even Tocchet, when Kuzmenko's on that line, I just don't think they're going to use that Pettersson line head-to-head against the opposition's best. And again, that puts a lot of pressure on Miller, Boeser, and whoever's on that left wing.
Yeah, absolutely.